parents are the most qualified people to understand their kids. And if we can be a small part of giving them perspective that being that close to the fire, so to speak, makes them lack, that's the best thing that we can do. But the fact that you are so close to that also means that you know that person inside and out from the time they were born until now. And so trust yourself and believe in yourself and what you're doing as parents.
Welcome to the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. My name's Travis Rogers. I'm a mental performance coach and the father of 2 athletic boys. Through this podcast, I hope to deliver actionable strategies that you can implement to help your son or daughter optimize their personal and athletic growth. I also hope these conversations help you enjoy the ride. Today's guest is Paul Weidner. Paul is the executive director at the Great Lakes Baseball Academy in Woodbury, Minnesota, and serves as an assistant baseball coach at Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. Paul is a certified sport and performance psychologist who carries a master's degree in applied sports psychology. With Paul's mental performance background, his work with youth athletes, and his work with college athletes, Paul brings a special perspective to the podcast. Here we go. I'd like to welcome Paul Weidner to the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. Paul, really good to have you. I'm excited about our discussion today. Really good to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about, I did go through the intro, but tell us about where you're at with Great Lakes Baseball, what you're doing with youth sports. Give us the whole breakdown on you.
Yeah, so right now I'm the executive director at Great Lakes Baseball Academy, so overseeing a lot of different things, trying to make sure all of our programs are where they need to be and all of the things that we value are being lived out through all of those things. But recently I've started to kind of take on a pillar that you started, but trying to take it and grow it to different places and new places with our mental performance. So I just recently got a master's degree in applied sports psychology from Adams State University. It was an excellent program. And so just trying to make sure I'm applying those things to our athletes in a very intentional way, whether that's running, mental performance, large group sessions on Monday nights, individual conversations with athletes just in passing, but also one-on-one settings with athletes, but also occasionally actually with parents, which I know is a big part of this podcast too. So trying to make sure that it's being used and utilized as best we can. So I've enjoyed that new aspect of my role here at Great Lakes, and it's kind of all encompassing in that way.
Well, give us a little bit of your background in sports.
Yep. So I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota, Randolph, Minnesota. And that small town, that small school allowed me to be able to play multiple sports. I was able to be a basketball player and a football player at levels that I really had no business actually playing high school varsity sports at, which is great. But I'm thankful for that opportunity, and it was important for my development overall to be able to play those other sports. Went on to play baseball at Bethel University in St. Paul and enjoyed that. Played there for 4 years and then jumped right on staff there for 3 years thereafter. So right after graduation that following year, I was on the coaching staff there, did that for 3 years. And then after that was also full-time here at Great Lakes. So I was the director of operations for 3 years after college as a full-time employee here. Combination of Bethel, but mostly Great Lakes connections that led me to being able to coach in the Cape Cod Baseball League out on the East Coast for a summer, which led me to getting a connection with an athlete that helped me end up coaching for 3 years at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, as the volunteer assistant coach, the absolute low person on the totem pole. I did more scrubbing pants than I did actually coaching, but it was an awesome experience. I loved it so much. Grateful for my ability to do that, and it was an awesome time. After that, for 3 years, moved back here to take on the role of associate head coach at Bethel University, as well as the executive director here, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So that's kind of my background and my journey that led me up to this. 2 years ago, decided to also take on the master's program in applied sports psychology with just kind of a vision of being able to, at worst, make that be a something that makes me a lot better baseball coach, and at best really apply it in a way that's meaningful as a real pillar here at Great Lakes. That's the idea.
The guy doesn't sleep, ladies and gentlemen, about 2 hours a night, and all this, and he looks like he's 22 years old. So yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for breaking that down. Let's get into it a little bit. So for the people that have listened to this podcast, I talked to Paul a little bit beforehand. Usually it's me asking questions and the person answering, which is great. Today I hope to get a little bit more. Paul and I have spent quite a bit of time, especially recently, kind of going back and forth on some mental performance ideas and thoughts. So hopefully we're going to get into that a little bit more, kind of a discussion between the two of us and differing opinions or similar opinions or whatever. But let's start with, you talked about with the mental performance, part of it has to do with the parents. Can you break that down for us a little bit? Do you have parent meetings? What's that look like?
Yeah, so we do a few different things. There's obviously just our overall meetings that we have, like our fall parent night, right? We try to set a standard for maybe code of conduct, but like a deeper meeting behind the code of conduct for why that actually benefits the athlete experience and creates the culture and the experience that we want to have. And the parents play a huge role in that. The other way that it looks, at least from me personally, is like, for example, I ran a 8 kids through a spring mental performance program last year that were high school athletes. And part of that program was that the first and last session was with the parents. So actually not with the athletes, it was with the parents. And so some of that was just trying to get their insight and their perspective and just make sure they know they're looped in on the process. But some of it, to be certain, was them saying, hey, I watched back this session because I do them over Zoom and I record them, and then I'm able to share that with them afterwards. And hey, I watched back this session with the athlete, and I noticed you talked about this, and I've been trying to do my best at being a positive part of that process. Like, tell me what that looks like. And so just educating them. And obviously it's a lot easier when they are willing participants in that, instead of it feeling like it's more of an instruction to them or a mandate to them. But been so thankful for a lot of the parents in our organization that have been willing participants in that journey and just wanting to get better, just like we all want to get better. I want to become a better coach. I want our players to become better players. I want our parents to become a better support system for those players. So it's all just about improvement. And so that's how it looks in a couple of different ways. And I think the one of the biggest things, and I won't try to like ramble on too much, but the role that the parents have, I think, gets oftentimes described as you want your parents to just be your biggest fans. And I think that there's a lot of good things to be said about that. I would love to take that a little bit of a different direction and say that I would love it if the role of the parents always felt like the biggest rock or stabilizing force that they have in sports. And so, when parents ask me about just really in-depth questions about what they can be doing, that's the best way I describe that to them, is that if they're able to be the not riding the roller coaster with the athlete, but rather be the platform that after that roller coaster is over, they get off and they're able to stand on steady ground with the parent, that seems to be the best place that a parent can actually be in. And so what does that look like? It looks different for everybody, obviously, but if you're somebody that is like, hey, you went 3 for 4 with a home run today, like, we're going to Dairy Queen. Okay, so that's awesome, because that's perceived as like I'm celebrating with the athlete. And man, you could do a lot worse than that. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's not a terrible thing. But the thought then is like, 3 for 4 with a home run, we celebrate. Well, what does that mean if I don't do that? And so in a small way, then you're actually participating in that roller coaster with them, instead of being like 0 for 4, 2 strikeouts. And I asked you, did you have fun? What'd you learn? Were you a good teammate? And also 3 for 4 with a home run, I asked you, what'd you learn? Did you have fun? Were you a good teammate? Like, they know that they're coming back to the same thing every time. And it's a very centering experience that they're getting out of a parent. It seems like that is maybe a more beneficial role than I'm their biggest fan, which you could do a lot worse than. But I think that tends to be my biggest advice when I talk to parents, especially one-on-one, about how they can play a good role in their athletes' lives.
That's awesomely said, and you covered kind of as questions were popping in my head as you were going through them, and then you jumped into what my question would be. So that's really good. So, how did you come to that place with those questions? Um, Run through those. I think it was 3 questions again that a parent would ask. What were those 3 again?
Yeah. Did you have fun? What'd you learn? Were you a good teammate? I think the it's just basically taking the things that we want to preach to our athletes at a very baseline level, and then wondering what the parents are doing to reinforce those messages. So like if we were working with an athlete, there's so much more that goes into it, and we are not, this isn't like church league softball or whatever, but like, did you have fun? Were you a good teammate? And what did you learn? Like those will never be the wrong things to ask yourself after a game. And then all of the other things that happen, we can also go into that, and we should, because it can't stop there. We all know that. But those 3 things you can always ask yourself as an athlete if you're doing this right. And so as parents, like, are you just being an extension of that and saying, I'm also asking my kids that, so that they are reminded of, oh yeah, like if I do those 3 things for the rest of my life, I'm probably in a pretty good place, which doesn't mean you're not a competitor. Doesn't mean you're not disappointed if you do poorly. It doesn't mean you're not thrilled if you did well, but those 3 things will never be the wrong questions. And I don't have those as like, you know, absolute truths of like some pillars that I have or something, but those are 3 questions that come to mind that I would go always. I just ask them those 3 things. And then whatever you want to talk about after that is great, but that's very centering to ask that: good game, bad game, or anything in between. They just know those 3 things are always true.
Love it. What? Let's go through each of those 3. And as you said, there might be more, but let's go through each of those 3 and see where it takes us. Like the fun piece. I've had people on the podcast, and fun is described differently for different athletes, and it can be a lot of different things, even just within the meaning of that. But why is that important? Why is that a great place to start, do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's not that the higher level of baseball that you play, that fun becomes less important. I think that question would maybe get reworded in a little bit more complex way. Like if you're talking about a college athlete or a major league baseball athlete, where it turns into more of like a, did the passion that you have for the sport stay true? Like that might be more of like the way I would go with a higher level athlete. But especially when we're talking about youth athletes, we're talking about 10 to 15-year-old kids, that it's so easy with all of the different things that exist now, including our organization. Like we are a part of this thing that is making the relationship that sports has with these kids' lives sometimes be skewed if we're not careful. And if you don't understand that you started playing this game in the first place to enjoy it and have fun, like as soon as that part goes away, you're probably missing something. And working one-on-one with athletes especially, I talk about how it's not that when you strike out, I expect you to smile. Like if you care about something and it goes poorly, it's okay to have, to dip below whatever your ideal like emotional state or whatever that confidence line would look like. It's about getting back up as fast as you can, which is maybe something we can dive into later. But it's not that it's not that losing is fun. It's not that, but it's like, did you understand that there is a 10,000-foot view of all this that said, I really hope you never stop looking forward to getting to the field every day, because if that stops, we're in big trouble. And crushing loss is supposed to be hard and hurt, and I don't want that to change either. But turning the page to say, if you have a game tomorrow, I really hope you're looking forward to it, because this is supposed to be big picture fun, even if maybe that word needs to be unpacked in a little bit of a different way. And we're not always just seeking happiness and I struck out, so I'm still supposed to be happy. Like that's actually just fairyland. We're not living in that world. But that would be the first thing, I guess, that I would say. And that question can evolve maybe a little bit more as they get older.
I like the word passion. So let's try to unpack passion a little bit. And it can be fun can drive passion. What other things do you think drive passion? Like I think you can cover from 8 years old to professional, whatever. Like that word covers it for me. It covers pretty much all the ages, and you can still be passionate when you do strike out. Passionate about wanting to do better. Passionate about wanting to not have that happen again. What other things do you think drive that word? Like maybe that's a
Yep.
loaded question or too much, but
No, it's good. Like from a bigger picture standpoint, like we're probably all hoping to fill ourselves with things as often as possible that give us fulfillment. Like that was worth my time and energy, regardless of how it went. And so to try to get there with like a super young athlete, like maybe that's a little bit tougher, but does this still fulfill you in a way that is meaningful to you? Like I was just working with an athlete last night and trying to get him to go from, and maybe I'm going a little bit of a different direction here, but like trying to get him to go from I only love success to I actually love competing, and the success or failure will be a part of that. So his specific example is that he's a significantly better pitcher than he is hitter. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that maybe you enjoy pitching more than hitting, but I can tell it's almost perfectly tied to just he's good at one and not good at another one. And if you're good at something, of course, you're going to naturally like maybe enjoy it a little more. Like we're not trying to change that too much. But in both settings, if he can just fall in love with competing versus success, then he can decide after that in probably a better frame of mind what he really likes and doesn't like. So like his dad wanted to go hit with him in the batting cage. And he's like, I do not want to do that because I think I'm only going to, barrel up a baseball 2 out of 10. But if you want to play catch, I'll do that because I can throw the ball really hard. Boy, that's a hard way to go about it because it gets away from more of like the process stuff and more towards I just chase it because I'm good at it. A lot more angles we could go with that. And I hate the process only and kids that never turn the page to competing. That's a problem, I think, sometimes. But nonetheless, like, can you fall in love with the process of competing instead of falling in love with success? And if you do, I think that will continue to fulfill you because you put yourself in competitive situations that you're looking forward to. And in the end of all of it, maybe the word we can use zooming out would be fun, even if disappointment and all that stuff is still a part of it. So I think I went like 3 layers deep and maybe a right turn there to answer that question, but those are
no,
things that can lead to it, right?
yeah, no, not at all. I think that's super important, and I want to try to dive into that a little bit more. So I think it's pretty obvious that fulfillment, passion, fun come from success.
Yes.
So we have to be careful as coaches, parents, players on how we define success. So this athlete you were working with yesterday defined success as results. I can throw really hard. I hit my target, right? But my results in hitting aren't quite the same. We all, coaches, athletes, parents, want passion to be driven by more than just outcomes or results. So how do we get there? You talked about the process a little bit. We want athletes that, not to throw this, well, let's go wherever we go. This kid has a fixed mindset, right? Like it's result oriented versus a growth mindset, which anybody who's watched these podcasts or read the book knows these terms. Growth mindset is I'll do whatever to get better. I believe that I can get better. And I think in athletics or in anything, that's part of what we want is this growth mindset where it's not where I am right now, it's where I can get to. So that's what you're working with this young athlete. How do we get that? Or how can, even more important, like how can parents help their son or daughter to develop a growth mindset, to develop passion through the process
Yep.
not just based on the results. Because it's easy when the results are there. We don't have to worry about passion and fun when they go for 4 for 4.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we steer them towards, we're 0 for 4. We still want you to be passionate.
Mm-hmm.
We still want you to love the game, or understand at least that this is part of the process of learning, getting better, growing. Your thoughts?
Yeah. The exact how of that is probably different for everybody, and also something that if somebody figures out perfectly, like I would love to hear that. When you started asking that question, the thing that first came to my mind was what you kind of dove into with the growth mindset being a little bit more of how we define success. So, there's the very easy way of just saying, like, if you're just 1% better than you were yesterday, that is success. And in order to get 1% better, you have to do things that challenge you and maybe make you fail. So that's a probably way too simplified way of saying it. But we could just start and stop there of like, how do you define success? Well, just being 1% better than you were yesterday is a definition of success. Even if at the end of all of it, of course, we're trying to have larger goals. Another kind of analogy that it seems like I've been using it a lot lately, and so maybe this is just good timing to talk about this, is there's like, the athlete is on one side of the forest, and on the other side of the forest represents all of their big long-term goals that they have. So I want to be a varsity hitter. I want to play college baseball. I want to do all that different type of stuff. They're like looking all the way on the other side of the forest and seeing those goals. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be able to understand that there are trees that are right in front of you that you have to just start chopping away at. And if you chop away at that tree that day, and maybe it doesn't even come down, like it's hard. You keep going, keep going, keep going. When you go to bed at night, you have to get to the place where you understand that as long as I made more chops in that tree, that is for today the success that I'm looking for, because I can't go do something else until later, which of course invites the conversation about not trying to create a picture of linear success, because that's not how it works either. Like sometimes you take steps backwards in this long-term journey, but to make it as simple as possible, like start chopping that tree that's right in front of you, and then go to bed knowing that you chopped at that tree or you didn't. And if you didn't, that's actually failure. If you did, that's actually success. The role that parents can play in this, working with a few different athletes, that I think this is an important thing to the different voices that they allow to enter their mind and affect the way that they go about their business. The very inner circle of who your most important relationships are in sports, for kids, the parents are almost always in that inner circle, right? And I always encourage kids to only allow people into that inner circle when it comes to your sports relationships that don't just understand what's on the other side of the forest. They understand the tree that's right in front of you. And if they're not helping you chop that tree down, then they don't belong in that very most inner ring. That next ring out, there's nothing wrong with those people. They are probably nice. They're probably friends of yours. They're probably whatever. But as a parent, you have to understand that you are in that inner circle almost certainly. And if you are not helping them with the tree that's right in front of them, but instead helping them set goals that are on the other side of the forest, which I suppose there's nothing wrong with, but you can't set that there and then expect them to just figure that out on their own. Help them understand that today you have to do something about that, and what are those things? And then tomorrow it's going to be the same thing, and tomorrow it's going to be the same thing. And so that's how, as a parent, you can be a part of that success process, is knowing that they have to know what the trees are that are right in front of them. And you also have to keep your sights set there, not always set on the long-term stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it certainly does. So what can I do today to help me tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day? What are some of those things do you think? Let's talk baseball, since you're the baseball guy. What are some things that come up that parents can help with that are right in front of their son or in any sport, son or daughter? What are we missing, or what can parents,
Yep.
what trees can parents help their son or daughter to knock down or to take a shot at anyways?
Yep. So there's a bunch of different ways this could go. As far as like addressing what are the actual trees. So like from an athlete's perspective, trying to get them to understand that actually there is a tree that's right in front of you that does say like you got to get your homework done, because that tree is actually a tree that is there that's keeping you from playing Division I college baseball. Because if you can't get your schoolwork done, you're never going to get to that spot. And so some athletes just want to like, that's not a tree. No, it is. Stop ignoring that tree. Like start chopping at that one too. Um, from a parent perspective, like the obvious ones are just like, making sure that they are as prepared as they can be, either to prepare themselves to want to go work hard at something, or obviously the younger you are, like you actually need to be the ones that get them to practice and get them to all these different things. Not in a way that's all consuming, but also making sure they go into that practice or into that training session with the right frame of mind. And so that goes back to what we were talking about a handful of minutes ago, which is, as parents, are you having them go into the training session, having them understand that I kind of hope that you fail today, because that's probably a step in the right direction, instead of always being like, when are you going to be able to hit an 85-mile-per-hour pitching machine? Like, well, whenever I get there. But today I only hit it 2 out of 10 times, and that needs to be good. If we only set the pitching machine to 60 every single day and you hit 10 out of 10 of them, like that's success, but that's not 1% better type of success that we want them to be chasing. And so those are the types of things that I think of. And I get a lot of parents that are thankful that I want to talk about the schoolwork stuff in that avenue, because they, of course, are like, I tell my kid to do my homework and he doesn't listen to me because I'm mom and dad. And I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. And I guarantee you, when they are 14 and 13, they will be telling me the exact same thing. Doesn't matter what I say or do. And I'll be hoping that I have somebody in their life that can tell them that's not me. And so it's that cycle is just going to continue for every single parent, probably as we go. But as best you can, having parents that promote the right things when they're going into a game, going into a training session, doing the right things at school, making the right choices. Those are trees that are right in front of them, that we should really have our sights set on.
How about like give me some tangibles, some really I can the next time I drop my kid off at practice, we want them to attack the day, attack the practice, attack the tree. What do I say to them right when I'm dropping them off at a practice?
Yeah. I think if your statement or your question before practice is more process oriented, and then your follow-up question afterwards matches that, they're going to be able to connect those dots really well. So like, for example, not to repeat myself, but like, make sure this is way too simple, but it's fine. This is a good question. Make sure you work really hard today. And then the follow-up question being like, did you work really hard today? So they know before and afterwards, I asked the same question, like, man, that must be a really important thing. Or if it's a social thing, like if it's the teammate question, which is another one of those three, it's like, make sure you are a great teammate today, or make sure you connect with somebody new today. And then you ask them afterwards, like, did you connect with somebody new? Were you coachable? Were you these things that are really good parts of the process? If you're just asking those questions before and matching that with afterwards, because if you say it before, like, try really hard today, and then after the game you say, why'd you swing at that 0-2 curveball in the dirt? There's a disconnect there. They're like, yeah, I know you said to try hard, but it seems like you're telling me that if I try really hard, that I must not be swinging at that 0-2 curveball in the dirt. And effort and outcome is not actually linear in sport. It's not, they're not connected always in sports. It's obviously a good mentality to be in. We want kids that give effort. So nothing wrong with that, obviously, but they're not connected. And if you as an athlete feel like my parent is always trying to connect. I didn't try hard enough. That's why I swung at the 0-2 curveball in the dirt. Not great. But if it's effort before and effort afterwards, they're going to always maybe, hopefully, have that as a guiding light of theirs in what they think about while they're at practice or while they're at a game.
Love it. Really great advice. And that ties it back to, we were talking earlier about growth mindset and how you develop that ongoing passion despite the results, despite the outcome. Because we can have, if it's a good practice that we have set up as coaches, there's going to be some failure in there. Mm-hmm. And we want that, right? So if a player's going in there saying, this is going to be, I'm going to do everything great in this practice, well, we hope not, because then you're not on that line of getting a little bit better today. So I love that. I don't think I've heard anybody say to whatever you say beforehand, and it should be process-based, effort, attitude, energy, teammate, work hard. And yeah, those things are kind of cliche and seem simple, but what else is there? That's it. So, and then following that up for sure with that afterwards, not asking how you did hitting against so-and-so or whatever. Anything change for you with the games then? Anything different as the parents dropping a kid off versus practice settings, or is it the same?
No, I think it's very similar, and that's probably intentional, to be honest. I think that, the inevitable roller coaster that will come with a game is probably higher, and I wouldn't want it any other way, by the way. Obviously, we don't want to ride the roller coaster. That's part of what we talk about with being stable. But if you don't ramp up a little bit of the intensity in games, I'm not sure why we're out here competing. Like, there's got to be a little bit of emotion that evokes in you, because that's fun, and I don't ever want to get to a place where that's not something that we want. But again, the stabilizing force that a parent should be before and after a game is probably much more important than before and after even a training session. So not only do I think it doesn't change much, it's probably even more important than it is before and after a practice for it to stay the same, because they're going to be seeking that stability, or at least they should, regardless. Yeah.
Love it. And again, parents, that'll just help build up this growth mindset. And to Paul's point, that's the good and the bad thing about sport is, just because you do bring great effort, do work hard, are a great teammate, it doesn't necessarily mean the results are going to be there. But that's the really cool thing. And what we want to pull out of sport is, we can do everything right, and still sometimes it's not going to work, but we have to keep chopping at those trees, as you say. That's really cool.
Go ahead. I had one parent that I worked with, and again, there's a category of maybe really bad sport parenting that's like the parents that are yelling at their kids for striking out after a game. We all know those exist, and would love it if they just didn't exist, of course. But then there's this other area over here that is almost the right message. It's close. And then there's obviously maybe doing it a little bit better. And so another parent thing that I think of that I worked with recently, that probably fits in the almost right message category, is the dad. I asked a kid, okay, so if you call your parent after the game, he happens to be having, a lot of I want to be a really big people pleaser to the people that are close to me in my life. That's kind of one of his things, and I won't dive too much into it. But basically, I said, if you were to call your dad after a game and describe to him what happened, and it happened to be a bad game, what do you think his answer would be? And I thought the answer was almost great. He just said, he will always tell me that, well, I guess it's time to get in the batting cage and work even harder next time. And I'm like, that is so close to being right, because you're talking about moving forward. That's great. You're talking about a good quality, which is hard work. That's great. But I think what is missing in that is that the kid hears that he didn't try hard enough, and that's why he went 0 for 4. And that can have a bit of a negative effect if we're not careful, especially for a kid that is probably struggling more with how pent up he is in his anxiety about performance, as opposed to needing a kick in the butt to be motivated to do something, right? So you got to know your kid too. Like some kids need the kick in the butt because they're not doing what they say they want to do. And other kids need maybe a pull back on that and say, the answer maybe more appropriately would be like, it happens. Like, are you looking forward to training tomorrow? Cool. Just then look forward to that. Do what you got to do. And maybe next game you'll go 0 for 4 again. And maybe next game you go 4 for 4 again. But it's not that you didn't try hard enough.
Yeah.
As well intentioned as that message can be. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It just has me thinking through my kids and different players that I've coached and how they all definitely need different things. And we talk about hard work, but a lot of them are working hard. So sometimes it needs to be pulled back. The other thing from that is that message is maybe it's not, the kid probably did some great stuff, right? Stole a base, made a great play on defense. Like, I think that's also a great place to always start with. And you talk about the questions. Did you have fun? Learn? Were you a good teammate? What successes did you have? You know, a lot of kids, a lot of the kids I've had on this podcast are perfectionists. They're hard workers. They don't need that at all. They need more of, remember all the good things you do. Hunt the good. I've had a few coaches. So parents, be aware that awareness is huge. Like, what does my kid actually need here to help them develop great character skills, great character traits? That's really good. Another thing that I thought of as we were talking, and I kind of made it a loaded question, saying, what should a parent tell a kid? But I think even more valuable is asking the athlete what they want to get out of practice today, what they're going to bring to practice today, right? At Great Lakes, I know, well, we had kids journal beforehand. What do they want to get out of this today? So I think that's probably even a better and more powerful way for parents to go about it. And then what do you want out of this game today? What are you going to bring to this game today? And then afterwards, what were your thoughts? You know, how do you think it went? And that can guide the parent much better on the conversation.
Yeah.
Are they being super hard on themselves? Okay, I need to talk about all the things they did great. Are they going right past the fact that they weren't hustling, weren't bringing really good effort and energy? Okay, I need to ask them about that. Do you think your energy was there? So asking them really is a great way of, and I mentioned this to a couple of the athletes on the podcast, and they're like, that ding, 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 ding. Like, that would have been a much better way than getting in the car and being like, whether it's good or bad. I had one athlete tell me, parents had the greatest intentions, knew the sport, knew what to look for, but she didn't want to hear from them afterwards. She's already processing everything at 100 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. What she needed was just like, let's go get something to eat. Let's not think about this. So any thoughts on that spitball I just had?
No, it's good. Specifically that last part about not every kid wanting really any sort of debrief, especially if they tend to be somebody that, like, they struggle with their own voice in their head. I think there's an interesting, like, skill to be worked on that I try to work with a few different athletes on, which is like, if you're down and somebody comes up to you and tries to bring you up, we need to, like, live in the reality of the fact that that sometimes is hard. Like, you don't want to hear it in that moment. And can we ever be perfect in that if that's your natural inclination? Probably not. But understanding that one of the best tools, I think, like, if you're going along, this is like your ideal line, let's say, and you strike out and you don't go below the line, which is normal. We don't ever want to deal with somebody that's here and they strike out and they just stay right here. That means they don't care and it means nothing to them. Dipping down below the line for a certain amount of time is a normal thing to have happen. Mental performance comes in when you're trying to turn the corner to come back up. Like that's where all the work is done, especially when things are starting to, fly in the game and all that. One of the best ways to turn the corner is to understand that if you allow people in to here that are at this line, you're going to be naturally inclined to come back up with them. And so trying to get them to understand that even if it doesn't feel good, you should be allowing those people in to some degree, because at least they're probably here where you want to be. And so get into that room and allow that to help pull you back up, which doesn't mean it's going to be easy or feel good or whatever. But when you start equipping them with tools, a lot of the tools that you want to equip them with are not easy tools. And if they were, they already would have done them. That's why it's hard to do. And so the balance between this is, I took it in a certain direction, and I'll bring it back to kind of what you're saying. Like the conversation after the game. I think it's important for a parent to understand what that athlete needs at that point in time. I also think it's important that the athlete understands that at the very least, as long as that parent is trying to bring you back up, you have to be at a place to let them to a certain degree, because it's actually a tool that somebody's offering you that you're either saying, yep, I got it and I'm going to take it and use it, or you're saying that tool is not what I want right now. So be willing to allow people in here that can help you, even if it hurts, I guess, is my long-winded answer of saying that, which is not advice for parents. My advice for parents is to have a feel for what your athlete needs. But if I'm working with the athlete, I would say there's two sides of that relationship, and you got to do your part too, which is to let them in a little bit if they're trying to help.
Good. Yeah. No, I like that. You mentioned the word, all these things, the fun, the passion, learning, good teammate. But you talked about getting in the game, and we've talked about this a lot, and so I just want to get your thoughts. We talk about competing, like the game is all about competing.
Yeah.
Tell me about that word. Like how do you define that word? What does that look like? Actionable measures on the field. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So results can't be the measuring stick with which we view everything by. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for too much of a roller coaster and ultimately a lot of disappointment. But if results become not a thing at all, then we're in trouble. So, for example, they just kind of go back to this line a little bit. If we've ever gotten to the point where a success doesn't make you go up and a failure doesn't make you go down, you have lost the point of the whole thing, which is like, we're trying to go at it and there is results and there is all this different type of stuff. So it's not about not letting this happen. It's about how well you deal with it when it does happen. And I think that, and I never thought we would get to this place. And I'm not like, I'm not 60 years old, but like even back in a while back when I was like in high school, there was no such thing as any kid that would ever not ride the up and down. And some kids just managed it better than others. Some kids today, because of how process we've become, almost become numb to any sort of results. And they don't allow the results to dictate anything about how they're going about things. So like knowing what adjustments to make, knowing if the process that you're so focused on is actually working or not. And when you get away from that, it's really difficult to say you're still competing. And, this is maybe chasing something that not everybody can be, but like my favorite type of athlete to watch is an athlete that has a little bit of like a killer instinct, a little bit of like, he's like a bulldog. Like that's a fun athlete to watch and a fun athlete to coach. And if we become so numb to that type of like, let's go mindset, we're losing a lot of the fun of it. And we're also losing the point of why we're doing it in the first place. Because 10,000 foot view, competing is meant to be the highs and the lows. And boy, that's what's fun of it in the first place. Like, I don't know what else we're trying to do. Obviously, we're trying to build great humans that can do that above and beyond later on. But that's an applicable thing for life too. Like, good luck hiding from that forever. You're not going to do that. So we might as well get people that can lean into the competitive nature, and it does hurt when you strike out and it does feel good when you get a home run. Don't ever stop that. And when you do, you're probably in trouble. So that's, I guess, the best way I don't even know if I defined it, but like maybe I described what it looks like and trying to make sure that that never stops, I guess.
Well, I think, and no, that's, you described it really well and what it looks like. So I'm just thinking about parents parents want to see their son or daughter be competitive. They want that competitive nature. And some kids like just have it, and it doesn't have to be taught. It doesn't have to be, some kids you have to like pull back on the reins a little bit. But I hear, coaches and parents, we need to compete. We need to, what are they, how are they, the athletes supposed to, how can the parents help their athletes if they think they are too process oriented, as you talk about, or they just don't seem to have that competitive edge, that competitive nature? How can parents push that a little bit? How can parents, or can they try to draw that out of their son or daughter?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know if that's something that can or can't do. I do know this, that if any sort of, like, one of the barriers I think that you can at least try to remove and then see what happens is if any sort of the competitiveness is being removed by an athlete being scared to compete because it'll hurt more if it doesn't work, is a barrier that at least I think you can try to remove. So like an analogy that I've used is the view is better from the 5th floor, but if you fall off of the 5th floor, it's obviously going to hurt. Maybe that's like, let's use ladder rungs because we don't want anybody falling off 5th floors. The view from the top of the ladder is a lot better, right? It also hurts more if you fall from the top of the ladder. So some kids are like, I'm only going to go to the 2nd rung of the ladder and just park myself there. And then I can maybe hide behind process to avoid competing, when really the only thing that's worth competing for is at the top of that ladder. So at least like allowing yourself to go there. And it's a lot safer to be down here, but don't be safe. Like, it's fine. Get up there and see what happens. Knowing that if you do fall, it's going to hurt and it's going to suck. But then the mental tools that we've tried to equip you with can at least then come into play about getting back up on that ladder. And by the time the next pitch happens, you're at the top rung again. But if you never get there, that sucks. That's too bad,
No, I think that's great. So no, that's really great. So I think two things, my thoughts, two things. If they're non-competitive, if they're not competing while they're out on the field in a game, it's either something, they're having some sort of negative thoughts. To your point, it's fear. They're afraid if I strike out, if I do put myself out there, if I do go for it and I fail, then what? Coaches are going to get mad. Teammates are going to be let down, disappointing my parents, whatever it might be. So all these things that we have to be aware of as parents, it's not just as easy as go out there and compete. Well, what if they have these other things going on? So we have to be really careful as parents to, again, support a growth mindset, support the process, talk to them about giving their best and the importance of that, asking them if they think it's important again. So creating this no fear zone, I think is super important. And then what I talk to them about is, what does it actually look like when you're competing to the best of your abilities? What is the actionable steps we can take? It's the things we've talked about. My energy is really great. I'm being a great teammate. I'm resilient, right? Something bad happens. I get knocked down. I'm right back up, So it's all these other pieces. I think if we define what it looks like to be competitive, what the body language looks like, then kids can be like, oh yeah, I can attack that. But just the word competitive, I think a lot of times kids don't know what it looks like. Parents don't know how to describe it, define it. Why is my kid not competitive? Why are you know? So I think take all those things to kind of sum that up, and then get your thoughts. Make
Well,
sure nothing's holding them back from being competitive, and
mhm.
make sure they know what competitive actually looks like.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, so I want to actually ask you to keep going with that. One of my favorite conversations about kind of performance psychology that I've ever had was when you were in our office probably, I don't know, a month and a half ago or something like that. And you talked about how, we've been talking about sports psychology stuff. I haven't been like in the weeds in it until recently, but sports psychology stuff since back when I was coaching who was coaching Drew when he was like 12, right? And you had talked about how you've come a little bit back towards results being results mattering. I'm butchering that, but like results mattering as opposed to being only process oriented, just from observations that you've had and different experiences that you've had. Can you talk to me about like where you were with that before and where you are with it now? Because I think when you talk about the difference between where you were and where you are now with that concept, that can help paint a picture of both sides of it, of the competitiveness being gone. And I just think you're really good at explaining it, probably better than me. So I want to hear you explain it, where you were, where you are now, on results actually mattering in the whole deal.
Well, I think I got to that place with some teams that I coach. Like it's always best to reflect as a parent or a coach on how things are going. Are they going in the direction that we want them to go, or are they not? So in teams that I coached and really just focused on the process, never talked about winning the games or outcomes or any of that stuff. With those teams, great teammates, great effort, great energy, uh, passionate about the game, love showing up for practice, all the things that you would want. And then with some of those teams, though, we would get into the games, and if it wasn't going the way they wanted, uh, even with the energy and effort and being great teammates, if we were getting our butts kicked or whatever the situation was, there wasn't that next level that you talked about with competitive. Like, I'm going to figure this out no matter what. I'm going to have to find a way to dig a little deep to figure out my fastball's not working. I'm going nothing but curveballs.
Yeah.
This guy's throwing really hard. I need to make an adjustment. I need to scoot back in the whatever it might be. So I got to this point with a couple of my teams where they just didn't seem to have that, like you talked about, like, no, we're not going to lose. Right. And I think that is important, not so much on the field in that moment in that game, but in life. You have to have that little bit of resiliency where, you know what, I'm gonna find something to fight through this. At least give it my best effort. So that's where I plug back in. Like, I still don't really talk about winning the game very, very often. Not never. But I do talk about, I do set teams up or athletes up with, what do you want to achieve? Okay. Whether it's batting average, home runs, win games if it's with the team. Okay, what do we have to do to get there? And so we do have those goals where I never really even had those goals before.
Mhm.
So I think having those goals pushes that competitive edge, and making sure then people know that we compete, we still lose. What I've done is made it as the competitions are the test, right? We have to put all our energy, everything we've got into the test. Whatever we do on the test, we learn from it. If we win the test, we learn from it. If we lose, we learn from it. Like, how do we keep getting better? So, but there is a test. To your point, there with all the tests, what are we doing? We're just practicing all the time.
Yeah.
And there is power in that, but there's also power in knowing that in life, in sports, There is a test. So I hope you set me up for failure on this one, Paul, saying I explained it so good, but I hope that makes sense. So it was really through discovery. Okay, so my own kids, Will was a part of this group of guys that process oriented. Man, they nailed it.
Yeah.
And things, there was one season, things went great. We won 5 straight tournaments. And then we finally got to a tournament, we got punched, and it was like, wait, we did everything right, but we still lost. But did we? I didn't see that. Just, I don't like this term a lot, but I didn't see that grit. I didn't see that, um, you know, willingness to band together and to figure out what do we got to do to win this game. What do we got to do here? And I think that, so at that point I was like, maybe I need to start again, not emphasizing it, but yeah, for lack of a better term, like, this is our test. Are we ready? Let's see.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think I love the way you described that, and I love it. I knew you did do a great job. I knew you would do a really good job of that. Like that you talk a little bit about, almost never talking about winning the game. And I think I differentiate with you a little bit on that, just from the standpoint of like the most special things that I've ever been a part of in athletics has been when every single person that's a part of it, you're not doing it by yourself. So nothing I've ever done in sports is worth anything that I've done on my own. It's always being a part of something bigger than myself. And then when that thing that's bigger than yourself, they all have a kind of a guiding light that is driving what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that there's any problem with that guiding light being winning, as long as the guardrails that you have on a day-to-day basis, you have somebody that's keeping you within those guardrails and helping you manage it when it doesn't happen. But talking about, we want to win the game, we want to win the conference championship, we want to win a national championship, like, to me, those are all things that are like, heck yeah, that's awesome. And then, but doing that without the ability to work it back to today and togetherness and bigger than myself, and then you have the disconnect. But saying I want to win the game and having that be a guiding light is something that I have never understood not wanting to do. I guess that's like the best way I could describe maybe some of the differences we've had in opinion on that over the years, and maybe still do. I'm not sure.
No, and I think when we used to have these discussions, if you just, to your point, exactly, you can have winning. When I work with the Mounds U baseball team, we set up our goals. We want to win the conference. We want to win the state tournament. Awesome. How are we going to do it? What do we need to do on a daily basis? My fear with coaches or parents talking about results or winning is that they don't put up those guardrails. Mm-hmm. It's just out there, and then we just beat on it all the time. I've been around teams where they talk about winning, but don't explain the hows. Don't explain that this is what we do on a daily basis. This is how we challenge ourselves. So that's my fear with that. I have no, whether I've come to a aha moment on this or talking to you or whatever, I have no fear about talking. It's just not something that comes natural for me, I guess, at this point, to say, like, let's go out and win this game. It's still, for me, it's always, but I again, to your point, I there's not a problem with that if you say it and then back it up with the process. So I would just say, for parents, that's fine. If your son or daughter says they want to score X amount of points, they want to have this certain batting average, awesome. But way more important than that, and that is a guiding light, to your point, that is a target, that is a goal, and that can be a motivator. But how do we do it? It is so much more important, because if they just have that, it becomes this circle of frustration, right? Yeah. I want to hit 400. I went 0 for 4. oh shoot, now I got to go 4 for 4 next game, or 3 for 4 just to get back to it. So be
Mhm.
real careful with that, parents, is all I'm saying
Yeah,
about that.
good.
Anything
No, I
to
like it.
anything to throw in on that, or is that, do we cover that one?
No, no, that's really good. This is not, and this podcast isn't about coaches necessarily, but I've always felt it's really good when coaches clarify that their number one goal in things is, and whether they state it or not, it is true. Coaches would like to win games,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And it
yeah,
also means, like, if you're coaching a high school baseball team, you then make sure you state that to your team so that they understand that just being the one that showed up early instead of being the one that showed up on time doesn't mean you're going to play shortstop ahead of the guy that is better than you at shortstop. Now, if that shortstop is doing things that are actively detrimental to the team, obviously there's discipline and like things that have to happen. This is not a free for all, but I think some parents, hopefully some, not all, but they're like, my kid's the hardest worker. I don't understand why he's not playing. Well, because he's not as good as the guy ahead of him. And we are trying to win games. That doesn't mean he's not an important role on the team. But like, I can see that playing out from a parent perspective, though, too, in high school sports. And you've actually been an exact high school baseball coach. I have not coached at that level specifically. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all, but I could see that playing out in a way of wanting things that are all well intentioned. They work really hard. They did all the things in the off season, whatever. But if you're attempting to win baseball games, and we've at least stated that as our goal, you can understand all of the decisions from there backwards that a coach makes, that players do or don't make, in a little bit of an easier fashion, I guess. And so if we're trying to make that about parents, like, that can be something that they can think about when it comes to frustrations about, why is my son not playing? He's the hardest working kid on the team. Well, it's not always going to be about that. Always.
right, right,
You know?
right. No, for sure. I mean, that's true. I mean, there might be the high schools that I've been a part of, winning was a part of the culture.
Mm.
So definitely that's true, and something the parents to be aware of. I'm trying to think. So, um, we talked about fun and passion and went down this crazy path for the last 45 minutes on about what that looks like. I want to hit on the three main kind of things you started this with: fun, be passionate about it. Are they learning? Tell me about the learning piece. Like, why is that an important question? Why is that important for parents to constantly be mindful of, and then in turn the athletes be mindful of? What are we
Yeah, I
talking
think,
about there?
yeah. Going back to the definition of how you like define success, if you learned something from every single day, you probably inevitably became 1% better at that day. And if that can be our definition of success, at least in some capacity, which is to become 1% better than what you were the day before, then that becomes a more obvious reason why you would ask that question. Because if you learned something, that's good. Like, that's a way that you gain success, even in a brutal game. Like, you didn't get out of the first inning as a pitcher and you walked 6 guys. I'm not saying you want to have those days often, but if you can say that you learned something from that, you can at least say you took a step forward and begin to alter what your definition of success is in a way that will help you now. Like, not to, like, wow, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth, because in one hand you're saying winning matters, and if you walk 6 guys in the first inning, you probably didn't win. But so, like, I know it's both ends of that spectrum that we're talking about right now. But when there's nothing that you have left except to focus on a different definition of success because the scoreboard version didn't work out for you, you better still have this other one that you can lean into. And that is the 1% better um, than what you were the day before. And of course, whether or not the scoreboard did work out for you, that should still be true. And so I think I didn't phrase that overly well, saying if the scoreboard didn't work out, then you should learn. Regardless of the scoreboard working out, you should be learning so that you can have both definitions of success. One of them is largely out of your control. One of them is almost totally in your control. And so having both is a good thing.
Awesome. I'm trying to think about. So with both my kids in college now, this is zooming ahead of where probably most parents are listening to this. But I love these three things, and I'm going to use, instead of fun, passionate, because they're college, and I don't know, fun just feels like Dairy Queen and all that kind of stuff. And Drew might still be doing that, so let's be
Yeah.
honest. But so passionate. If they're passionate about the game, passionate about the sport, passionate about whatever they're doing, lots of great things are going to happen. If they're learning from the game, if they have that growth mindset, they're learning and trying to get better, and open to coaching and open to learning from teammates, uh, they're going to be successful at this. So again, I think the way you started this was awesome. Parents leaning into these things. Did you have fun? Did you learn? Were you a good team? So the learning piece is huge throughout. A curiosity. That word's been coming up in my head over and over and over again for some reason. I don't know if I read it somewhere or something we talked. I don't know, but being curious about, how can I get better at this? Whether it's your example, pitching, walk six guys, or whatever it might be. If I did have success, curious about why I had success. So that learning piece. So parents accentuating that, really, really talking to the kids, just as simple as Paul said, what did you learn today? That's something that Kaylee Bateman, who was a gymnast who was on this, she talked about her dad. Coach Keith Bateman would ask her, what did you learn today? So he created that foundation early, and it carries for a long time. Really cool. What about the good teammate one? So I think some people, wishy-washy, like, actually, I just want my son or daughter to be the best player out there and advance and get a college scholarship and whatever. What are your thoughts on the importance of parents putting that into their young athlete?
Yeah. There's probably the perspective that the athletes don't get to have at the time that they're hearing it, but we all know to be true later on, which is like the most important people in my life outside of my family. So my wife and kids and my family, the rest of my family, are the people that I met doing difficult things together, which was college sports. And they are the people that are going to be with me for the rest of my life. And that can also be high school sports or youth sports or whatever. Like I happen to connect a little bit more with my college, which is fine, but everybody will have it be in a different spot in their life. And, college is just because more you're coming into a new space in your life. But long story short, like we all understand that the things that are going to carry us on for the rest of our lives are the people and the relationships that we've made during those experiences. And that's really important. And it's important that those experiences are a little bit testing, a little bit trying, a little bit difficult, because those bonds become closer when that happens. Like I played a winter of intramural basketball at Bethel too, and I couldn't care less about the sixth guy on that team because that wasn't hard or difficult and didn't test me and didn't whatever. And I was, whatever. But like my college baseball teammates are the most important people in my life outside of my family because we went through those things together, and that relationship gets to carry on, for the rest of my life. That's not a perspective that athletes will probably have in the moment, but we all know that to be true. The perspective that they can have, or hopefully can try to have, is that nothing that's worth doing, like big picture stuff, is really worth doing for your own sake only. I talked about this a little bit earlier, that when you buy into being something bigger, or buy into being a part of something bigger than yourself, you'll become bigger than what you ever could have been on your own, as far as how you feel about that experience one way or another. So when you invest in other people, when you invest in your teammates, when you invest in your coaches, and try to make it so you can create those bonds that are deeper and deeper and deeper, that means when you win, it's going to fill you up way more. It means when it's over, you're going to be shedding tears that you won't be able to stop for hours. And I don't ever want that to be different, by the way. And everything in between. Winning on your own is empty. The only thing that's worth doing when you win is that you've shared that with other people that had that guiding light of like, that's what we wanted to do, and we did it together. And is winning more like, winning is can be empty regardless, even if you do share it with people. Like there has to be more to it than just wins and losses, obviously. But I do know that, I've had experiences where I've won and didn't buy into the team. And I've had experiences where I've lost, but felt really close here. And I take that loss and here every day of the week, every day of the week. And then if you're really fortunate, you get to win and have this because it just feels so good and you got to share it with people. Right. And then lastly, one of the most transferable skills that I think that sports can teach anybody is that you're going to have a boss someday, learn how to deal with them. You're going to have coworkers someday, learn how to deal with them. You're going to have other people in your life that are surrounding you that you may not otherwise have even liked. And maybe you'll like all your teammates and maybe you won't. But be a good teammate doesn't mean be a good teammate to the kids you like. It's be a good teammate, period. And we stop that sentence. So like that's a transferable life skill, maybe one of the most transferable life skills from sports to the rest of your life. So that's really true for like 3 different reasons why that would be an important thing.
Beautiful, beautifully said. What do you think parents can promote? What can they say or do or ask their sons or daughters to do to be a good teammate? What does it look like? What can they push? Push is too strong. What can they talk to them about?
Yep. The basis or start of any of that is just whether or not you respect the people around you, like inherently. And some teammates that are late all the time and don't give good energy back to you and all that different type of stuff doesn't mean you got to like them, and you probably lose some respect for them in some capacity. But are you starting from a place of like, I respect that person or not? And I think that a lot of that gets promoted at home first and foremost. Like most of the time, unless they've been with us for a long period of time and we got to be the ones that mold whether or not they're a good teammate, I'm a good teammate or not starts at whether or not their home life is promoting respect for others regardless. And so, man, parents, you have a huge role in that because there's not a lot of 12-year-olds that we have show up for their first season of fall baseball with us that in 2 weeks we made them a better teammate. They're a good teammate because you help them do that at home, or they're not. And obviously everybody has predispositions towards different personality traits that can make it more or less difficult. But you want to talk about something that parents have a huge role in, that's huge. Like that's a big deal. And we try to be a part of that. But parents, you're a big one there for sure.
Love it. It just popped into my head. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I had a conversation this morning with a friend of mine who has a son who's a 12U hockey player. And he had texted me and said, the hockey team is having all these problems. Kids are not getting along, a little fighting between the kids, bickering, yada, yada. So I got him on the phone and I said, did the coach talk to the parents about what you just said? Respect, being a great teammate. And he's like, I don't know. And I go, well, this is parent driven. They're 12 years old. Like they're getting this at home. If the parents aren't dropping them off and saying, hey, be respectful to your peers today, what are we going to do? So I think that's really awesome. And I just saw that again this morning and talking to a friend of mine. Anything else? That's awesome. I also think I wanted to add like that being a great teammate is that boomerang thing, right? Like we want our son or daughter to go out there and have the support of their teammates and their coaches. Well, they're not going to get that if they're always late to practice, if they're bad mouthing Joey. So we want it to come back when they need a little pick me up, when they need a little pat on the butt, when they need an arm around their shoulder. They have got to have already done that for other people as well. So that's definitely will push, as Paul said, not just long-term benefits and getting out, having a job and doing all those things, but in the moment, in that season, it's going to help them to become the best player they can be. That kind of reciprocated stuff. Coaches love those players. Other players love those players, and just the opposite is true. Yep. We know as coaches, right, Paul? Like if it's a kid that's like standoffish, not a good teammate, it's just a fact. we're going to have a harder time being invested in them as a coach.
Very much so.
So, really good. We'll start wrapping it up. I think we touched on a lot of great stuff. Is there anything else jumping into this that you wanted to convey, talk about? Anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we covered most of it, especially from the parenting aspect. And there's so much complexity that goes into performance psychology. It's like one of the coolest things that we've talked about over the last handful of weeks, you and I, is trying to portray such a complicated, like give enough credit or respect to how complicated performance psychology is, while also making it simple enough for even like ourselves. Like we're not these high and mighty, like we understand this stuff. Even like trying to break it down so we ourselves understand it while still giving it the respect it deserves is a very complicated thing to do, or is a very difficult thing to do. And so all of these podcasts, the fact that you have such a range of guests on probably highlights that complexity, as opposed to just like, I always talk to one person that seems to make this seem so simple every time. It's not simple at all. Like it's really hard, and parents ultimately know their kids better than anybody else does. And trusting that is a big deal. So, anytime I work with a parent and try to talk to them about like how they should be treating their kids, like I always lead with that. Like, I'm going to tell you how you should be treating your kid. It's your kid. You got it. I can give you my thoughts on it, and you can decide what of that you'd like to apply and not. But parents they're the most qualified people to understand their kids. And if we can be a small part of giving them perspective that being that close to the fire, so to speak, makes them lack, that's the best thing that we can do. Because as you know, when you're so close to something, it can be hard to see the bigger picture, and other people are looking at you laughing like, why would you act like that? But you're so close to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you are so close to that also means that you know that person inside and out from the time they were born until now. And so trust yourself and believe in yourself and what you're doing as parents. And our job is so dependent upon great parents being great parents. And we have a lot of them in this organization that really do care a lot about their kids in all the right ways. We're very lucky that that's true, that that's the case. So keep doing your thing, keep being great parents, and keep understanding that, if you're wanting to have one way of doing it, there really isn't. Just do your best. And if you care about them and you love them and all that stuff, like if that's the core of what you do, everything else will be fine. It just will. Love them and care about them, and everything else will be all right.
100%. Love that. One quick question, or maybe it's just a comment. That's great. If you're coming from a place of love, I was just reading a new book I jumped into, and they were talking about coaching and parenting. And if you're coming from a place of love, you're probably doing it right. Keep doing. I love the thing you mentioned way up front, like being the parent, being the stable for the athlete, the rock. How does, and maybe this is, we don't have enough time, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. How does a parent, like, where does a parent get that? Like, give me 2-3 things a parent can lean into to be that foundation, to be that rock, to not ride the highs and lows. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think as often as you can, you need to ask yourself what you want sports to mean to your athlete in a 20-year perspective, not in a 2-day perspective. Because once you get caught up in this season, this team, this week, this game, this pitch, you have a really hard time being the person that's all the way out here. Because your son or daughter does need to be competing their butt off on this pitch, which means we don't actually want them not to get too caught up in this pitch and this wave of things that are happening. We want them to manage it really well, but we want them to be a part of that thing that evokes so much emotion in us. And as parents, because of how much we care, we want to be right there attached at the hip. And if they're riding it, we're riding it with them. ask yourself what you want sports to mean to them in a big picture standpoint, and then use that to drive how you feel about it, your questions you ask your kids. Because I think if you do that, most people will ask and say the right things. They only ask and say and act inappropriately when they stop asking themselves the question of this, and they stay right here, which is exactly the lane the athlete's in. And that lane's only big enough for one. So just let it be one. And you'll be, back here as best you can. Not disinterested, but perspective that you have that they don't have. So do the best you can to use that perspective as well as you can use it.
That's awesome. Excellent advice. And I've talked about this in other podcasts. I would actually, last high school season for Drew was the first time I'm just a fan. I'm sitting up in the stands and had to, at times, actually, I have a little notebook and have written down what are those 20-year, 10-year, like the ultimate goals for this game he's about to play this season. What do I really hope he gains from this? And I have them written down. And I would go through them before I got out of my car to go up and watch the game. This at bat isn't that important. I want him to be a good human being. I want him to be respectful. I want him to be resilient, whatever it might be. And I had to do it. And I consider myself pretty good at this. I had to do it frequently. If it was a quote unquote big game, we got in the playoffs and Drew's been telling me that so-and-so is pitching for the other team and these scouts are going to be at the game today. I know they're going to be there. Like, I'm trying to ride that same lane. That's a great description. You said, I'm trying to ride in the same car with him.
And that's you. And you literally wrote a book on this. Okay. Well, there's your plug. This is a great book. You literally wrote a book on it, and you needed to be writing things down before your son takes the field about what's important to all of it. And so that should give people also some understanding that if you wrote this book on it and it's awesome, they could probably also benefit from a little bit of intentional perspective injection into their own lives because they need it and can use it. Now, I know dang well whatever sports or activities my kids choose to play, I could go back and look at this podcast and be like, I'm not following my own advice very well. Like, I know that's going to happen. I know it will, because it's hard and whatever, but in whatever role positively we can play in that, good for us. We're happy to be able to do it.
Yeah, I've stopped trying to tell parents not to be emotional. It's the same thing we talk to athletes about. You're invested. You want them to do well.
Yeah.
I've stopped trying to say, take a deep breath, like all this stuff. No, but we have to be able to be intentional about what we're trying to do, what our actions are going to be. Are we going to be yelling at the umpire from back there? Are we going to get into it with fans from the other teams? Like, we have to be intentional, just like our son or daughter has to be intentional about what their thoughts they're having when they walk up to the plate. It just is what it is. And this isn't all parents. I mean, I've seen some parents, right? You've seen them that there's a game going on and they're like, I'm sure they want their sons to do, but they're just not as invested. So I'm guessing the people that are watching this podcast have these struggles.
Yeah.
We all have them. We all have them, but to Paul's point, that's awesome. We have to be intentional about where we're going to place our thoughts and our actions and our conversations. And we have to try to be that rock. I love that. Mm-hmm. Paul, thanks so much, man. It was great to connect and to get your thoughts. Very well spoken. I really appreciate you. As always, good chatting with you. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being somebody I can always talk to about just asking questions, different things. I know I've sent you a few things over the past, weeks and months, and appreciate all that you do for us, for me, for all the families out there. You always have done that. So thanks for doing great things and keep it up.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.
Hang on here 1 second. This thing is going to upload and then I'll cut you loose. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. We're trying to spread the word. If you want more information on techniques, tools, strategies that you can use to help your son or daughter, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.